So I don't know whether I could just read what I was trying to test, but then Wilson will type them and send them to you. Do we read them or we just move on?
It's up to you.
It's up to me. Okay, it will need some time, but for the sake of those who can only go get it through the internet, let me read. So here I've written, our topic is church heritage, but our scope, the scope is the church of God through the ages. And so the first question is asking, what is a heritage? What is a heritage? Because unless we understand what a heritage is, then we could understand our topic well. Now, question number 2 is asking, the church of God runs from Eden to Eden. A, briefly describe what worship was like in the beginning in the Garden of Eden. B, confirm from the SOP that during that time there was a physical ladder connecting heaven and earth, where God could descend occasionally to be with his creation on earth. Please quote the book and section. C, how was worship in Eden connected to Jesus Christ? When you read SOP about the ladder, then you will understand how the worship was connected to Jesus Christ. Question number 3, the next church was the church out of Eden. This church covers the period from whom? Name the person, to whom? B, God himself gave a prophecy on this church till the end of time. What was it saying? Where is this found in the Bible? Remember the prophecy God is speaking to the serpent and the woman? Yes, that's the prophecy I want. C, God sent 2 prophets during this church's existence. Who were they? What were their messages? I believe you know the people I'm talking about. The 2 people who came with a message from God during that church. And just a clue, one of them, the proper message he had is found in the New Testament. So I believe you understand whom I'm talking about. And then D, there was a marked contrast during that church's existence between godly worshippers and non-worshippers. What are they referred to in the book of Genesis chapter 6? What name is given to those who are worshiping the true God and those who are not worshiping the true God in Genesis chapter 6? E, there were 3 major things that made God regret on having created human beings. Can you point them out in the book of Genesis chapter 6? There were 3 major things that made God regret on having created human beings. Can you point them out in the book of Genesis chapter 6? F, list the names of the remnant who remained from this church. List their names. There were not many, so you can list their names. Number 4, question number 4. The next church is the church after the flood. It ran from whom? Give name to whom? Give names. It ran from whom to whom? Give names. And then A, part of it, how many generations were there from Noah to Abraham? How many generations were there from Noah to Abraham? B, what is it that Abraham did that made God to say, now I know that you love me? Quote the Bible verse. There's something Abraham did which made God to say, now I know that you love me. C, Abraham was also shown a vision on his descendants' condition afterwards and their slavery. What was the vision stating? Quote the Bible verse. I'm repeating. Abraham was also shown a vision of his descendants' condition afterwards and their slavery. What was the vision stating? Quote the Bible verse. D, Abraham kept the 10 commandments and other God's requirements. Quote the Bible verse. Abraham kept the 10 commandments and other God's requirements. Quote the verse. Then we have F, the last person in this church. We have F. Jacob and his family were the remnants from this church. What was their number when they went to Egypt? Jacob and his family were the remnants from this church. What was their number when they went to Egypt? And what was the reason? Quote the Bible verse. What was their number when they went to Egypt? It was a complete number, those who remember. And what was the reason? Please quote the Bible verse. Then we come to the next church, the church in Egypt. The church in Egypt. At first, they were welcome guests, but later a majority joined in the worship of idols. Nevertheless, a remnant remained. Give their names. The clue is here. Those who worshipped the true God just before the birth of Moses. I'm repeating the question. The next church was the church in Egypt. That's church number 5. At first, they were welcome guests, but later a majority joined in the worship of idols. Nevertheless, a remnant remained. Give their names. Those who worshipped the true God just before the birth of Moses. The Bible has given their names, and God blessed them. A group of them, God blessed them. I believe we understand what I'm talking about. Then number 6. Number 6 is our last number in this test. The next church is the church in the wilderness. God sent Moses to bring the children of Israel out of Egypt. What was their number? What was their number? B, list the 10 plagues or miracles in order that God sent to show his might to the Pharaoh. List the 10 plagues or miracles in order that God sent to show his might to the Pharaoh. C, what was the biblical symbolism of the blood smeared on the doorposts? What was the biblical symbolism of the blood smeared on the doorposts? And then D, God introduced a number of new things in regards to his worship in the wilderness. Please list 10 new things or changes to worship introduced in the wilderness. I'm repeating. God introduced a number of new things in regards to his worship in the wilderness. Please list 10 new things, stroke changes to worship introduced in the wilderness. And then E, which is the last question. What was the direct symbolism to the cross introduced in this church? What was the direct symbolism to the cross introduced in this church? Quote verse in Old Testament and also in the New Testament. Quote a verse in the Old Testament and also in the New Testament. And class members, those are the questions I had prepared up to church number 6. So I was requesting that today we progress from where we stopped last time. Wilson will type them and we'll send them to you. So are we okay? Class members, are we okay to go?
Yes, yes.
Yes, that's okay.
That's okay. So Wilson, now you'll do the necessary. So last time we were in church number 7, the church under judges. And I know at times we've not understood why these people are called judges. So today I want to open your eyes. You see how judges were working. These people were busy. There was no office as busy as Samuel's office as a judge. And remember when we were finishing the class, we said Samuel had 3 titles. Can someone remind us? He had 3 titles. What were his titles?
The judge.
He was a judge, good.
The high priest.
He was also a high priest.
And the prophet.
And he was also a prophet. Now, Samuel is the only prophet recorded who had a diary. Do you know that? When you read prophets and kings, no, patriarchs and prophets, you get Samuel had a diary. He kept a diary. And the topic is called Samuel's diary. Now, this is why he kept a diary. Go with me to the book of 1 Samuel. The book of 1 Samuel. We are told how his schedule used to be. 1 Samuel chapter 7. First Samuel chapter 7. I want somebody to read for me from verse 13.
So the
verse 13, the first part. 1 Samuel 7, verse 13.
So the Philistines were subdued, and they did not come anymore within the border of Israel. And the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel.
Yes. Okay, just stop there. Then verse 15.
Now Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life.
Can you imagine? From being a young boy, all the days of his life, he was a judge. Okay, continue.
He used to go annually on circuit to Bethel and Gilgal and Mizpah, and he judged Israel in all these places.
Verse 17.
Then his return was to Ramah, for his house was there, and there he judged Israel, and he built there an altar to the Lord.
Okay. Now you can see why Samuel used to keep a diary. This work, you know, some of us, we see judges today, and a judge sits in a court, and people come to them. But how was the difference? How was Samuel judging?
He was coming to the people.
Yes, he would come to the people. Please note that. And I want you also to note his correlation to Jesus Christ. How was Jesus doing? Was he sitting somewhere and people could come to him?
No.
Class members, was Jesus a judge? Was he moving from place to place?
Yes.
Healing the sick and doing so many things. And during his time, the devil was subdued. So you can connect those two. During Samuel's time, the Philistines had no power over Israel. When Christ was here, the devil was subdued. He could always tell him, "Get behind me, Satan." And on the cross, he defeated him and he said, "It is finished." So I want you to realize that God could bring people early enough in the shadow of Jesus Christ, even in their work. But now, that was the last judge who judged all the days of his life. Now, chapter 8, something drastically happens. and we change. The church of God now changes to another format. Someone read chapter 8, verse 1.
Now it came to pass when Samuel was old, he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain, took bribes, and perverted justice. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, "Look, you are old and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations."
Just stop for a while. Did you get that? Did you get that? Something has happened. Something has changed. Who used to appoint the earlier judges? Wilson, are you there?
It was God.
But now, who is appointing his sons?
Samuel himself.
Samuel. Now, you see, there was a change there. Because earlier it's God who could bring up a judge. Even Samuel, it's God who brought him. But when he was now old, he brings his what? His two sons, not even one judge, but two. Very interesting. Were they clean people?
No.
They were not. Now continue with the story. So the people said, "We don't want your sons. We want a what instead?
King.
They want a king.
A king to do what?
To
It's
judge
very much
them.
important. They wanted a king to do what?
To judge them.
Really?
To lead them to the
To
Lord.
rule.
Yes, to rule, to lead them. My version says, this is NIV. But when they said, now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have. I want you to underline that. They did not want a king because Samuel's sons were bad, really, but they wanted to look like who?
Other nations around them.
Like other nations. Please underline that. So even today, when you see kings, I know there are countries which still have kings. It's not that that was God's plan. Please, not that. King Charles, the king of, I don't know, Norway or Netherlands, all these people. It was not God's plan for his people, specifically his church, to have kings rule over them. He had been the only king and he could appoint. But at this juncture, the Israelites are rejecting a judge and they're insisting on a king to look like the rest. That's a point to be noted. Okay, let's continue reading. Whoever was reading, please.
Okay. And the Lord, but the thing displeased Samuel when they said, "Give us a king to judge us." So Samuel prayed to the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, "Heed the voice of the people in all they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. According to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them out of Egypt, even to this day, with which they have forsaken me and served other gods, so they are doing to you also. Now therefore heed their voice. However, you shall solemnly forewarn them and show them the behavior of the king who will reign over them."
Ebu, pause for a while. What is God saying there? The class member who's reading. What is God saying? Do what to them?
Forewarn them.
Yeah, forewarn them. Forewarn them. Warn them in advance. Warn them in advance. You see, class members, there are times that we twist the hand of God. You know, we force him to do something he did not want to do. But in as much as he agrees to do it, he must also warn us of the consequences. You know, it's very much interesting. Okay, continue. What was the warning? What was it that was contained in the warning?
Okay, so Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who asked him for a king. And he said, this will be the behavior of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for his own chariots and to be his horsemen, and some will run before his chariots. He will appoint captains over his thousands and captains over his 50s, will set some to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and some to make his weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers. And he will take the best of your fields, your vineyards, and your olive groves and give them to his servants. He will take 1/10 of your grain and your vintage and give it to his officers and servants. And he will take your male servants, your female servants, your finest young men, and your donkeys and put them to his work. He will take 1/10 of your sheep, and you will be his servants. And you will cry out in that day because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, and the Lord will not hear you in that day.
Wow. Just wait. Are you comprehending what you've read? Okay, class members. Now you've heard from God's word. I want class.
We don't hear you now.
Hello?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you now. It was
sorry, there was a call. Yeah. Now, do you see these things happening even today?
Yes.
The presidents of the world, do they take some tax from the people?
A lot.
Now, do they do that task to fund the military, the police, people who guard them?
Yes, that's true.
And when they're driving in their chariot, they're the beasts. Do you see some men running ahead of the chariots, the secret agents?
Yeah, that's true.
So what is God saying here? He's saying, this you will see it because it was your choice, not mine. And that's why today we are taxed, and the best girls are married, or they work as concubines, or they work, he would take the best out of the people, this king. So now you can confirm that whatever comes out of the mouth of the Lord does not go without what?
It does not return to him without doing what he said.
Without doing what he has said.
Yes.
So this thing goes on up to date. So if you work in the secret agent, you work in the government office, you work in where, know that initially it was not God's plan. And that's why you feel bad when you give tax, when you're overtaxed. But God had said, well, you rejected me. Now continue with your kings. Okay, let's go on the next verse. What did the people say? Verse 19. Another person to read. Hello? Could there be another class member who would want to read for us verse 19? Hello? Are we there?
Yes, you say
verse
8,
19?
Verse 19
Yeah, verse
says,
19.
Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, Nay, but we will have a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles.
Wow. Did you get that? Now that will come in the question on this church, whether you like it or not. They had 3 reasons why they wanted a king, and they are stating them before Samuel. What was reason number 1?
Be like other nations.
Good. Reason number 2?
To judge them.
To lead them or to judge them. Yes. Reason number 3?
to fight their battles.
To go before them and fight their battles. The last verse there.
21. And Samuel heard all the words of the people, and he rehearsed them in the ears of the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, hearken unto their voice, and make them a king. And Samuel said unto them, to the men of Israel, go ye every man unto his city.
Sorry, listen to them and give them a king.
And Samuel said, yes. And Samuel said unto them of Israel, go ye every man unto his city.
You know, you forced God into doing what he didn't want. And God tells Samuel, relax, man, you go. Don't be angered. You give them what they want. Class members, I believe now we understand why when they wanted a king, there's a question I've always posed in class, whether God is democratic. Does God support democracy? Does God support democracy?
Yes.
Sure. So why did he tell them, go and choose your king?
I think, I don't know how to explain it, but I think God gives us the choice to choose. No, that's not the correct English, but he gives you the freedom to choose.
No, he didn't give them the freedom. Who chose for them a king? Verse 9. Verse 9, chapter, where Saul is anointed. Verse 17, chapter 9, verse 17.
And when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said unto him, behold, the man whom I speak to thee of, this same shall reign over my people.
Good.
Yeah,
so my question is, if God really supports democracy, why didn't he tell them, now you will select your own king, whom you want? Why did he choose for them a man? Wilson, why did he decide to choose for them a man?
Well, what I'm thinking is the same way Hulda was trying to bring it up is because, you know, God gives us that freedom per se to do whatever we feel we want to do, but that is not the will of God. So the will of God, God always wants his will. God always wants something good for us. But if we reject
but he cannot force it on us.
He cannot force it on us, yes.
Okay, now class members, thanks Wilson. I want to take you deeper so that you realize this is now my mind as a teacher. Why God decided to choose for them the first king. Number one, those three things they said they wanted a king for. Number one was to do what? To be like the what?
To be like other nations.
Yes, like others. You remember when the Philistines came to war, they fronted Goliath. You remember?
Yes.
Yes.
Who was leading them to war? The giants, the bigger people, who would lead them to war. Now, God, number one, chose for them the tallest. Get that? See, they wanted to be like the others. Hello?
Yes, that's true.
So God chose for them who? The tallest. Saul was the tallest in Israel. You can get a Bible verse talking about that. No one passed his shoulders in terms of height. Number two, they wanted a king who could do what? Judge them or lead them. And also go before them and fight their battles. And now God gets them somebody who could satisfy their eyes. But in the real sense, could he fight?
So I don't think so.
He could not fight. You see, when Goliath was to fight Goliath, he's even giving his arms, is what? His armory to who? To David.
To David, yes.
This guy was a coward. But there's something I wanted you to see. God had told them all the consequences, what this king was going to do. Take your sons, do what, run in front of his chariot. God gave them that such a man who could do all these things so that his prophecy could come to be the truth. They wanted somebody to lead them to war, but interestingly, the tallest who they had, so that they looked like the others, could not even lead them to war. And so my question was, I'm still asking whether God supported democracy here. Because God anointed the first king, and after Saul died, who else came? After Saul, who was the king?
David.
Okay, who anointed him?
Samuel.
No, yeah,
God.
but who chose him? But who chose him?
God.
Okay, after David died, who came? Solomon. Who anointed Solomon?
David.
David did not anoint him. God himself spoke. God himself spoke and said, I will be with you. Don't you remember God asking him? He's asking God for wisdom, and God is giving him. So what we are learning is God was really trying to protect Israel, trying to show them the weaknesses of their kings. Look at Solomon, many wives and concubines. Look at David, many wives. Look at King Saul, going to a witch. What lesson was God trying to show people here? Class members, could we react?
Well, I think he wanted to show them that kings are just the people.
Yeah.
And they have their weaknesses, and the judge system was better for Israel.
Thanks, Vitaly.
Because God was leading the nation, not the king.
Thanks, Vitaly. You've just hit it where I wanted it. God wanted them to compare when earthly human beings are leading them and when he was leading them, so that they can now compare and see, because they really wanted a king just to look like others. You know, there are so many things. We can draw a parallel on this. There are so many things today that we've borrowed so that we just look like the world. Even our church, there are things we've borrowed so that we look like the rest, you know, so that we fit in. So that we fit in. I don't know. There's this kind of music called celebration music. You've seen it? Hello? Hello, class members. Yeah, I'm just giving an example. Eh?
What's one example of such a song?
I'm saying in our country here, there's this issue of celebration music where people come and the guitars are loud and the instruments, and people will dance for half the day. They're just dancing and they're saying they're celebrating. They're just dancing, you know. Then you wonder, these people, we thought things should be done in moderation. But now in the half the day you spend just dancing and jumping and saying you're celebrating the Lord, until people are out of their senses. I'm just saying, very soon, some of our churches might think this is the right way to go, just to look like the other people. Because at times we've been attacked that our worship is boring. Some people have even said, you know, Adventists, you don't have the Holy Spirit, you know. Class members, have you heard such things?
Yes.
Now my sister who's answered, When people say we don't have the Holy Spirit, will you start speaking in a tongue you don't understand?
Well, now let me react to that. Just saying that, when people say that our church is boring, they say, when the Spirit moves you, you have to run and jump around, and that's one thing I've heard.
Like them.
And yes, and then when it comes to, someone asked me why we don't speak in tongues.
Yeah.
And I just said, we don't speak in tongues because speaking in tongues doesn't mean that you're speaking in a language. You're speaking just any rubbish. It's just a language. It's actually a language. It's just that someone has to understand it.
Someone has to translate.
So yeah, for our church, we just have to know the Bible for us to answer these things.
Okay, I just wanted you to answer in accordance to this. There are times that God's people forget and they want to look like the world. We start using phrases. Even when someone is dead, we use phrases which are used by the world. Have you heard of those phrases? Like so and so. Like which words do you use when somebody dies?
They have gone to heaven.
We can say they've gone to heaven. Some people say they've passed on. They've passed on. They've passed on into another life, There's this theory of incarnation. The incarnation theory?
Some people are saying they dance.
Yeah, from one life form.
Some people are saying they have gone to dance with the angels.
Yes, dance with the angels, and they're crying. Wilson, what amazes me, they are crying down here. So when you dance with the angels, do you cry? Yeah, so there are things we do to fit in the world, and God is busy looking at us and seeing where we'll end with all this. Now, very quickly, I wanted us to see something interesting. We had kings in Israel, and the first kings, that is King Saul, King David, King Solomon, were all anointed of the Lord. And they all reigned for 40 years. They all reigned 40 years. If you have Bible verses, David reigned 40 years. That's 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 11. Solomon also reigned 40 years. That's 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 26. And Saul also reigned 40 years. You can get that in the Bible. And so I'm having a question. Why 40 years for the first three kings? Why were they reigning for 40 years?
I'm not sure. It must be connected with the 40 years Israelites were in a desert.
Yes.
For 4 years, Moses was preparing for his ministry. It must be something with that.
Yes.
What's the number 40 then?
We had 40 days. Moses, 3 times, 40 days, Moses was up in the mountain with God.
Yes.
Even Joseph embalmed his father for 40 days. That is Jacob. That's Genesis chapter 50, verse 2. 40 has a significance. Why is it having a significance? 40 days of Jesus in the wilderness fasting. Now, if you were to try and think, anytime there's 40, 40, 40 in the Bible, it's a time of what? And in the New Testament is now 42 weeks, 42, 120, 60, 12, 60 days. Now, 40 days, according to me, if you ask me, most of the times I've seen 40 appearing in the Bible, it's like a period God has left for either training or a time of testing. I'm repeating, believe we are noting down. It's a time for equipping or training, but it's also a time for testing, God testing. When Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days, the devil came there to test him. When Moses could be up with God for 40 days, God was equipping him. You remember that anytime he could come down, his face was as bright as what?
As the sun?
Yes, and people could not look at him straight away. So he had to cover his face with a veil. So the first three kings, God was just informing us and giving us a test that you people, look at how earthly kings are now leading you. They took tax from the people. They had the best horses like Solomon. Solomon became very rich and he had many servants. What God had said came to be true. Now, because I'm saying we have 10 more minutes, there was this challenge. When the people introduced a king, when the people wanted a king and a king was introduced, what was the role of the king? What was the role of the king? Hello? Hello?
Well, as we spoke before, the role of the king was basically to lead, to judge,
Yeah.
just
And to make them look like the others.
yeah.
Okay. But now when we go on, you discover, because God has given information that the king would be so harsh and would take the best from the people and would tax the people, if there was no control measure, someone to control that, to curb that, the people would turn into slavery. Vitaly, is that not a fact?
Basically, yes.
So, two more officers were introduced during the king's time to curb on that. So, as you go on with the kings, when you read about all the kings, anytime the king would have in excess, you remember David when he took Bathsheba?
Yes.
Who came to inform him?
The prophet.
The prophet. So take note of that. The prophets could warn kings. Get that? So that kings were not having absolute power. Amen?
Amen.
Yeah, God brought something to a governor, a speed governor, to govern the speed of kings, or else they could turn people into slavery. So they could warn and even prophesy. People feared the kings. So normal people could not go. Because you go to a king and you bow down and you say, may you live forever. May you live forever. So people feared telling the king what was happening. And that's why we have this phrase called, the king is naked. But nobody can tell him because they feared them. So God had prophets who could even warn the kings. Now, in terms of worshiping God and atonement for the Israelites, was this left to the king?
No.
No.
Was it left to the prophet?
No.
It was left to who?
Priest.
The priest.
To the high priest. So please note that. We had three centers of power. We had three centers of power. So the king was basically executive, administrative. He was planning for the wars, planning on how rations would be made, signing agreements and treaties. But the prophet was there as a messenger of the Lord, direct messenger. He could say what the Lord wants, whether God is pleased or displeased. But when it comes to worshiping God, services, and forgiveness of sins, and atonement, then we had the high priest. So by human beings needing a king, and by the introduction of a king, administrative issues came out from God and were now handed over to human beings. And this brought a challenge. All the time the Israelites had kings, there was a challenge, my friends. And we know, finally, when Solomon's sons became kings, the nation was divided into two. The nation was divided into two. It was divided into which and which? Can somebody help us?
North and south.
North and south. The north was called what?
The Judea.
Really?
Oh, it was Israel, and the south is Judea.
Yeah, Sawa. So the north had how many tribes?
Two and 10.
The north had how many tribes?
North had 10.
10.
Yes, 10. And the south had how many tribes?
2.
2.
Now I want you to see how God is so kind and gracious. For both of those kingdoms, the northern and the southern kingdom, did he have prophets there?
He did. He did.
Yes. To check on who?
On kings.
Yeah, the prophets were there to check on the kings, and not only kings, even the high priests. You remember, like Eli earlier? It is Prophet Samuel who warned him. And later, so the prophets could deliver direct message from the Lord. And people could also inquire of the Lord from the prophet. But then when it came to worship and giving of thanks and offerings, who was in charge of that? The priest's office. And so, class members, I think now we remain with the kings. I would wish that we list all the kings of the northern kingdom and all the kings of the southern kingdom. And then I'll focus. In the next class, I want us to focus on some specific kings and what they did, so that we try to draw a parallel between us today and these kings. And so today, I think we will stop there. For the next 3 or so minutes, if somebody has a question, maybe you could answer. You could ask, so that the class members, we assist each other in answering.
So my question is, well, it's so basically this church heritage class.
Yeah.
Is there like honor for that, or it's just part of the curriculum?
Okay, there's an honor, but we'll come to it later. The Adventist Pioneer Honor.
Yes, but it's a little different than the one that we have right now.
No, this is just, we are just doing the Church of God through the ages. And from the word go, I told you that I'm just filling the gap. You know, the section which the book is not covering.
Okay.
Because our church heritage book, actually, it's summarizing the Old Testament church in 2 paragraphs. I don't know whether you've seen that.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, that's why I said, let's just follow the churches, so that when pathfinders or adventurers ask us questions, we can now answer. Like the 10 Commandments. Before Moses was given the 10 Commandments, were people keeping the 10 Commandments? You see, if we don't look at the Old Testament critically, we might be tempted to say, yes, there were not 10 Commandments. But now, as we are learning, we see 10 Commandments were there from the word go. So I'm just trying to fill in the gap. And then we'll also come, there are also the silent centuries between the Testaments. So much was happening. But our book is silent. The Bible is also silent. Vitally. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah, so we'll be digging into that. We see what was it that was really happening during these silent centuries. Was the church silent really? And that's why we want just to top up to what is in the book.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. But we have an honor. The honor is Adventist Pioneer Heritage. Then we also have the Church Heritage Award patch. You know it?
Yes.
Yeah. So my intention is that by the end of the class, we should be having those 2. Okay, another question?
Well, basically, my next question is, remember last time we were talking about when the Samuel was at the temple, and Eli was at the, sleeping in the temple.
Yeah.
You said that he was sleeping in the most holy place.
Yes.
And actually, I spoke and I thought about that, and I spoke with my pastor, and he said, well, it was not possible for the priest to be in the most holy place, because as we know from the Bible, the high priest can enter the most holy place only once a year.
Yeah.
And while we were talking about that, and I said to him, your opinion, and we could not, we could not find the support for
You
that.
could not find that. Huh? Okay, so you did not agree.
Well, personally, I don't think that Samuel was sleeping in the most holy place, because by the nature of the most holy place.
Okay.
But the Bible is not really specific, so it gives us a room for like interpretation. And it's not that, maybe it's not important, but it's kind of nice to know.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay. Let me answer that next time. I wanted to go back there, but I'm seeing there's no time.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Any other person with a question before we finish? Okay. If there's no other person with a question, I hope we are moving on well and everything is clear. So Wilson, we'll come back to you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Elder.